Alright, welcome back, grade 12 Precious. So, for today's lesson, we will have the following objectives. Create HTML5 document using advanced techniques with JavaScript CSS3. So, we have implement graphical effects and transformations by using the CSS3 properties. Apply style to block elements by using CSS3. Use CSS3 selectors to specify the elements to be styled in a web application. Style text elements on an HTML5 page by using CSS3. By the way, kindly submit your edited version of your CSS file from this morning's activity. Thank you. So I'll be expecting your CSS edited version this afternoon. Okay, so let's continue. We will have the word spacing property. So word spacing property specifies the space between words in a text. So the word spacing property specifies the space between words in a text. Just like the letter spacing property, you can set the word spacing value as normal, length, or inherent. So when a word spacing is used, it is necessary to keep the selected paragraph with normal word spacing. The normal option is usually used. So the measurements you used for word spacing or to define an extra space between words, you can use the positive measurement values like x, ct, cm, mm, inches, em, and ex. But negative values are also permitted. So let's look at these examples. So let's create a new document. Name it as or save it as text.html. So save your HTML to any folder. Okay. So let's create a CSS file. New. Let's save this as CSS. Files. The file as styles. And select Cascade Sheet File, CSS. And make sure it is saved on the same folder, CSS2. And so this is an example of word spacing property. So let's create the HTML first. So we will be using the P element. Let's create a class. Name it as normal. And another P class, which is tx. For with spacing. So the first paragraph will have no spacing. The second paragraph will have spacing of tx. So let's go to our CSS. Try to give the design for class normal. So we have word spacing, normal. And for our px, class px, word spacing 30. Okay, so let's save and try to run over. Alright, so as you can see, the first paragraph has no spacing between the words, while the second paragraph is spaced at 30 px. Now, word spacing could use the other measurement values such as pt, pc, mm, inches, em, and ex. Negative values are also permitted as measurement for our word spacing. So let's have an example with a negative value. So let's create another P class. So this first class would be for positive value. The second would be for our negative value. So let's name the class as negative. So our CSS, let's add as positive. That's 20 px. For our class C negative, that is negative 5 px. Let's look at what will happen. Okay, so when you say negative px, notice there's no spacing at our words or paragraph. The next is the white space property. The white space property specifies how white space inside an element is handled. So the values can be set as normal, inherit, no wrap, pre-line, and pre-wrap. The no wrap value makes the text continue on the same line until a BR tag is encountered, and also collapses all sequences of white space into a single white space. So let's look at this example. So this next example is for the white space property. So let's have just plain paragraph. So the CSS for that would be so again, the white space can have a pre-line or pre-wrap. You can use the values pre-line, and pre-wrap. The text will only wrap on line breaks and white space. Pre-line, the text will wrap where there is a break in code, but extra white space is still ignored. Pre-wrap, text will wrap when necessary and on line breaks. So let's look at the example. So here's an example that will make use of the pre-line pre-wrap white space property. Thus, you have noticed I've put lots of spaces and line break. So the CSS code will be Okay, so the first one have multiple spaces and a line break. The second one, as you can notice, although we spaced it in our HTML, diba, dagan to siya space dire, but the multiple spaces are ignored. So the last one this has spaces and line. Kaning line break na nag-enter ba ako dire earlier. So let's proceed. The CSS box model. So all HTML elements can be considered as boxes. The CSS box model represents the design and layout of the site. It consists of margins, borders, paddings, and the actual content. The properties work in the same order as top, right, bottom, and left. Again, margins, borders, padding works in this order from top, then right, bottom, and then left. So let's look at this image. This is from sololearn.com. So you have the margin, the border, the padding, and this is the actual content. So every element of the web page is a box. CSS uses the box model to determine how big the boxes are and how to place them. The box model is also used to calculate the actual width and height of the HTML elements. So we have the total width of an element. So when working with boxes, it is important to understand how the total width of an element is calculated. For example, the total width of a box with paddings will be the sum of width plus padding left and padding right. So if a box has margins, borders, and paddings, the total width is the sum of the left and right margins, left and right borders, left and right paddings, and the actual width of the content. When you set the width and height properties of an element with CSS, you set the width and height of the content area. When setting a background color to a box, it covers the content area as well as the padding. So for the total height, this is height na siya, no? Typo error. So this is height. Again, this is height. So for the total height of an element, the total height of an element is calculated the same way as the width. The example, for example, if there's a box with padding, border, and margin, then the total element height would be equal to height plus top padding plus bottom padding plus top border plus bottom border plus top margin. And we have here another example from sololearn.com, an image showing the height of our box or our element, the height of our element. Okay, so let's proceed to the border property. The CSS border property allows you to customize the borders of HTML elements. In order to add a border to the element, you need to specify the size, the style, and the color of the border. So let us look at this example. So this is an example of a solid border. Okay, so ano na-appeal ning uban? Because we set it to P. No? So, gi-consider niya nga tanan P. Yan manggod ta na P padding 10px, border 5px solid green. So, tanan P, giutangan niya og border. Okay ta? Okay, so border width. So, the properties for the border can be set separately. The border width property specifies the width of the border. So, look at this example. So, let's edit it up and let's try the border width properties for our border. So, let's have a class for this. Palilit tanan. Let's have class first. Okay, for the first P first, you have the border is set at 2px. The second border, it's set at 5px. The border width is at x. Noticeable man po ilang difference, no? For 2px, the border width is thinner compared to 5px. Then we have the border color. The border color of an element can be defined using a color name or RGB or hex values. So let me remind you again that RGB stands for red, green, and blue. The first number here is the red, the colors of red. It can be from 0 to 255. And this second number here is for green. Again, the values could be from 0 to 255. And the last one is for blue. Again, the values could be from 0 to 255. You'll just have to play along these values so you can get your desired color. You can also use hex values. Hex values comprises of 6 digits. They are actually RGB pero gi 6 lang siya, no. 2 for red, 2 for green, and 2 for blue. So that's for hex values. So let's look at this example. So this example next is the border color. So ato lang i-edit itong class first. So let's have the third class, which will have the RGB values. So let's go to our styles. Let's edit our P first and add border color. Since it's the color name, so let's just say the name of the color, blue. For the second one, we will have hex border color. For hex, you just use the number sign followed by the combination numbers. And again, the first the first values here is for red, the second two for green, last two for blue. And for the third one, have the same, but we will use RGB. So you type the word RGB followed by the color combination that you can think of. So let's look at the output. So the first one has a blue border, the second one somewhat orangey border, and the third one what greenish border. So ganun greenish siya because, or green gid siya because we set the value to 153, meaning ang green lang ang dominant na color. Walay red, walay blue. So are we clear with RGB, with hex and color name? So this part, I'm just showing you that the hex values could, the example of hex values is this one. Again, the first two numbers is for red. Second two values, this one, the middle two, is for green, and the last two would be for blue. Now, hexadecimal values is from 0 to F, meaning the values for the first two numbers here, the values could be from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Instead of 10, you will use A, 11B, 12C, 13D, 14E, and 15F. Kaya ang values man sa hexa is from 0 to 15, but you cannot use 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 kay magbalik-balik naman ang numbers 1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Maglibog na siya. So that's why you replace ang values from 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15 with the letters from A to F. Okay, again, the first two is for green, red, the second two is for green, and the last two is for blue. For that is for border color. All right, so next we have the border style. The default value of border style is none, which defines no border. There are various styles supported for the border style property: the dotted, the dashed, the double, the groove, bridge, inset, outset, and hidden. Note, you can specify different borders for different sides through border top style, border right style, border bottom style, and border left style. So let us look at this example. So the next would be the border style. Next example would be border style. So let's try to look at the different border styles. Let's have the CSS code for each of the border styles CSS can the CSS have. So save your work, and let's look at how it looks. So the first one, we have no border. Wait, let's edit our HTML first. All right. So let's go again to our HTML. So the first one has no border. So this is how dotted looks like. This is dashed, double. This one is grooved, no ridge, and inset. Wala siya kumpay na sa ubos. Then we have the outset. Kumpay siya sa inset. And of course, hidden. Para siya no border, right? For hidden, ito siya. Let's proceed to CSS width and height. So to style a div element, to have a total width and height of 100 px, here is an example. The next example is the CSS width and height. So we're using the div element. Let's try to add style to show the total width and height of our div element. So the total width and height should be 100px. So let's look at our HTML file. So we have here the total width and height of this is 100px. The total width and height of the box will be 90px plus 5px border plus 5px border equals 100px. So for width and height measurement, the width and height of an element can be also assigned using percents and pixels, no? So let's look at the example again. We could also use percentage for our width and height. So let's look at, again, this example would using percent. So this is 100. This is the percent. No? So there's a difference when you use px and when you use percent. Then we have the minimum and maximum sizes. To set the minimum and maximum height and width of an element, you can use the following properties. The mean width, it's the minimum width of an element. The minimum height, it's the minimum height of the element. Max width, the maximum width of an element, and max height, the maximum height of an element. So let us look at the example below. Let's look at this example. So the next example is setting the minimum height and the maximum width of different paragraphs to 100px. First and F. So let's add the CSS. Okay, so first one, we have the minimum height of this paragraph is set to 100 px, and the maximum width is the maximum width and minimum. Next, we have the background color property. The background color property is used to specify the background color of an element. So let's look at this example. So the background color values can be defined, or the color of the background can be defined using three different formats, such as the color name, the hexadecimal values, and the RGB. Next example, we have the background color. So let's set the background color of our page to blue. Say okay, so the background color now becomes blue. So let's try setting the background color with, so we've used the hexa here. So let's try the RGB on our next example. So let's say H1. So we will be setting the background color of our H1 to a color that uses the RGB color. RGB again stands for red, green, blue. The values again is from, we can use 0 and between 0 to 255. You can use 255. Okay, so for this case, we will just set it to for our. So let us look, let's see what color is produced when we have these values for our RGB. Okay, so we have there. What color is it? So this is the color for this. Or para danhing color. Para siya greenish sa huwag kayo makita kaya nasabunan. Anyways, then we have the background image property. The background image property sets one or several background images in an element. Let's set a background image for the body element with this example. Let's proceed. This example is for the background image. So let's try to put a background image for our body. Now make sure that your image is with your HTML file. So let's go first to our files. So I have with me here piece.png, so that we will be using that file for our background image. Background image URL. Okay, so we have our background image for HTML. So by default, a background image is placed at the top left corner of an element and is repeated both vertically and horizontally to cover the entire element. But background image property can be set not only for the whole page but for the individual elements as well. So let us look at this example. So for our next example, we will try to put a background image to one of our HTML element. Kaya dili lang man sa body ang atong background image. We could use a background image to other elements. Let's say on our H1. Let's add some background image. So I'll still be using the same image. Okay, so I changed the image to something different from our previous one para nagi different. I tried to try PNG. We look at our output now on the part of H1. Okay. So again, background image could be used with other HTML, only the body. So we have the background repeat property. The background repeat property specifies how background images are repeated. A background image can be repeated along the horizontal axis, the vertical axis, both axes, or not repeated at all. So the repeat-x will repeat a background image only horizontally. The repeat-y will repeat a background image only vertically. So if you want the image to be shown only once, then use the no repeat value. But when you can also set the value to inherit. So when you set the background repeat property to inherit, it will take the same specified value as the property for the element's parent. Example. Let's look at this example. So let's try the repeat x for our background repeat property. So let's go to our body CSS, and have background repeat for our image and see what it can have. Background repeat. So what happened with repeat X? Repeat X, the background is repeated horizontally. No? Horizontal. First image here, second horizontal. Let's try the repeat Y. What it does. So if you notice, repeat Y, vertical po siya. So if you want the image to be shown only once, then you can use no repeat value. So let's try the no repeat value. Let's say no save, and so no repeat. The image said there's only. Are we clear with repeat X, repeat, and no? Good. So let's proceed. Then we have the background attachment property. So the background attachment property sets whether a background image is fixed or scrolls with the rest of the page. Even if an element has a scrolling mechanism, a fixed background doesn't move with the element. So let us look at this example. Next, we have the background attachment. So when you say background attachment, it could be fixed, scroll, and the other one, inherit. Yes. So let's try to have it as fixed. So you have background attachment is fixed. Let's see what it does if we set it as fixed. Okay, since it's fixed, then the image is not movable. The background attachment values, you can also set the background attachment to inherit or scroll. When you set the background attachment to inherit, it will inherit the value from its parent element. When you set the background attachment to scroll, the background image will scroll with the rest of the content. So let's look at this example. So let's try the scroll. Oh, wait. So you again. But again, when you say fixed, then it's not movable. Then let's try the scroll. If you use scroll, the image goes up. If you use fix, naagid si image pirmi. Ta? So we also have the list style property. So the CSS list properties allows us to set different list item markers. So in HTML, there are two types of list: the unordered list, where the list items are marked with bullets, and the ordered list, where the list items are marked with the number or letter. With CSS, list can be styled further and images can be used as the list item marker. One of the ways is used to the list style type property, which can be set to circle, square, decimal, disk, lower, alpha, and it's among others. So let's look at this example. So the next is the list style type property. So let's try to have the list here for our in our HTML. Okay, so you have for ordered list, lower alpha, an ordered list circle, and an ordered list. Look at right. Okay. Have for the first one, ordered list of a an ordered list circle. You have circles. This one. So that is the list style type property. So the list image and position. So there are also other list properties such as the list style image, which specifies an image to be used as the list item marker. The list style position, which specifies the position of the marker box, the inside and outside. So let's look at this example. So we can use an image as a list item marker and specify the position to be inside of the content flow. Next, we have the list image and position. The CSS. Okay, so you have here for the list style position inside red and image ang ating gamit. So the list style property is a shorthand property for setting list style type, list style image, and list style position. It is used to set all of the list properties in one declaration. So instead na tulo ka buo kang imuhang sulaton, pwede na siya isa using the list style property. We also have the list style na pwede na ito i-shorten. So, instead na kani instead na inani siya, let's try to shorten it with just the list style. So, we will just say list style, then square, outside. The square is for the list style type, outside is for the list style position, and the none would be for the list style image. So they will have the same output. Kaya siya shortened. So next we have the table properties. So tables in HTML can be greatly improved with CSS. So we have the border collapse property specifies whether the table borders are collapsed into a single border or separated as default. If the borders are separate, the border spacing property can be used to change the spacing. So let's look at the example. Next, we have the table properties. So let's create a table. Board 1. Okay, so for our CS, look at it on. Okay, so we have the table. So we also have the caption side property. The caption side property specifies the position of a table caption. The values can be set as top or bottom. In the example below, or in the example after this, we'll show the caption side property. Now let's put some caption to our table. Caption. Go to our CSS. So we have the caption right. Courses per color. Sample naman siya. Next, we have the empty cells property. The empty cells property specifies whether or not to display borders and background on empty cells in a table. So the possible values are show, where the borders of an empty cell are rendered, or hide, where the borders of an empty cell are not drawn. So here is the empty cells property that is used to hide borders of empty cells in the table element. Then we also have the table layout property. So the table layout specifies how the width of the table columns is calculated. The possible values are auto, when column or cell width are not explicitly set, the column width will be in proportion to the amount of content in the cells that make up the column. We can also use fixed. When column or cell width are not explicitly set, the column width will not be affected by the amount of content in the cells to make up the column. So by default, the table layout is set to auto. So let's look at the example so we can be able to show, or so that you can see the difference between auto and fixed. Alright, the next is the empty cells property of our table. So let's go back to our index HTML and edit our table. Change the colors. So same and then we will have the chart. Let's add one more. Let's remove yellow here so that there will be a blank table. Save. Let's go to our CSS and let's try to hide the blank cell. So let's say empty cells. Let's our browser. You have there gi-hide niya yung empty. Okay? That's empty cells hide. Next, we have the table layout property, which can be auto or fixed. Okay, so let's edit table. set our goal to class. Okay, so we have the first one, the table is set to auto. Then you have the TD width is 10%. Then we have the width, the first data is 10%, the second is 90%. That is for auto. The second one, set to fix. Let's see what will happen with auto and fix. So let's go to our CSS. So let's look at it. Okay, so the first one we have auto. So taas man itong kay auto siya. Itong fix, siya niya. Okay, so that's different. Auto and fix. When you say fix gid na siya. No? If you set it to be, notice now our fixed, we set it at with 10% for this one. For this one. 10% lagi. Ang auto ni adjust siya. Hidden. Okay, so next we have setting styles to links. So links can be styled with any CSS property, such as color, font family, background. So in addition, links can be styled differently, depending on what state they are in. So the following are the pseudo selectors that we can use. We can use link, which defines the style for normal unvisited link. So katong wala pa na visit ni mga link, so a link lang siya, normal. A visited if the style defines the style for visited links. Unsa daw mahitabo sa imong link if somebody visits it na. Kung nag-click na bito tong link, then A active, a link becomes active once you click on it. So what happens if you click on the link or if it becomes active? And hover. A link is hovered when the mouse is over it. So what will happen if a user will hover, kanang mo point na bitong pointer dito sa word or sa imong link? So let's look at the example below that will show you the styles when the mouse is moved over it. Next, have the links. Let's try to have the link. Okay, so for our CSS, have A over. Now, what happened if we move our mouse above our link? Let's say the red. Let's look at page. Okay, so this is our link. So when we hover our mouse above it, the color changes. So that is hover. So, by the way, when setting the style for several link states, there are some order rules. a hover must come after a link and a visited. So meaning una sa si a link o si a visited ay hanin mo isulat si a hover. Then a active must come after a hover. Clear? All right, let's continue. Oh, we also have the link, the text decoration sa atong link, no? So by default, the text links are underlined by the browser. As you have noticed atong mga previous activities, atong mga previous examples, na mo underline to show nga link na siya. So one of the most common uses of CSS with links is to remove the underline. In the next example that I will be showing you, the text decoration property is used to remove the underline. So if you notice, there is an underline right here. So how about if we remove that underline using the links text decoration? So with link text decoration, we set our CSS to this. So again, hover must come after link. So unahon na to link. Should be a link. A link. Text decoration. Set to close it. Okay, let's see if nawala na tong underline here. So we have here the underline is, but when we hover, naaragyapan nawala si underline. So that's the purpose of our text decoration set to none. So the following properties are used to control the look and feel of links. We have border none, which removes border from images with links. We have also outline set to none, removes the dotted border on clicked lines in Internet Explorer. So the next is setting the mouse cursor style. Style sa imong mouse whenever you are in your web or in your HTML. So CSS allows you to set your desired cursor style when you mouse over an element. For example, you can change your cursor into a hand icon, help icon, and much more rather than using the default pointer. So let's look at the example below. So next is setting up our mouse cursor. So let's try putting on a mouse cursor to our span element. So let's go to our kaniha nagamit kog style. Let's see. So the cursor becomes a pointer with a question mark. So that is the cursor help. So the cursor property values can be default, crosshair, pointer, or let's look at the image. Pwede na ninyo pang gamiton such as the auto, the crosshair, the default, the move, the help text, and so on and so forth. Guide na ninyo ang kanang. No? So, usually, the appearance of the mouse cursor is altered to provide a more interesting experience for website visitors. However, choosing the wrong cursor style can be misleading as well. So be careful with your cursors. Alright, so that's the end of our discussion for this week. Now, for your activity, you are again required to create the CSS file for this design. So let's look at it closely. Okay. So I'll be providing you with the HTML again and the icons used for this one. And of course, the image. I will be providing you with this. So see you guys next week. Thank you for watching. And before I forget, please make a comment below so that I will know if you're still with me this afternoon. Thank you.